Welcome back to the channel. We're going to kick off a new series called Resolve Essentials. So I'm going to show you how to open up a project, create a timeline, bring media in, adjust your media before you edit, some volume control, adding transitions, and making transitions as your favorites. So let's jump on it. So once you've downloaded Resolve, you got to make a project. You'll be greeted with this project manager here, and it'll say Untitled Project. You can double click on that, or you can say New Project and give your project a name. So this houses all your Resolve projects. So if you're working with different frame rates, different media, different edits, you want to keep them all organized, you can make folders and you can make projects here. So let's go into Untitled Project, and you'll just be greeted with a big blank screen here and nothing works. So it's not very intuitive until you get to know it. Resolve has pages. So if we look down here at the bottom, we have 7 pages: a media, a cut, an edit, fusion, color, fairlight, and deliver. So you got to think of it like a workflow. Media is where you bring media in. Cut is where you do like a rough cut. You can go through a lot of media. I'll show you that later. Edit's where you take a zoomed in look at your edit, and this is typically what you'd see. Fusion is your graphics generator and does a whole lot more, but that's a whole other specialized tab that I'll make a whole new video on. Then you got your color tab for fixing your color or changing your color spaces. Fairlight is your audio editor. It's like a DAW. So that one you can just specialize in the audio. And then you have a deliver page, which is how do you want to format your file to export. So let's go over to the media page, since that's page 1. How do we bring media into Resolve? So over here we have our volumes, our hard drives. So if you have an external drive or a network location, it'll be over here. So if you plug a drive in from a client, it'll mount over here. If you need to add a new location, you right click in this section here. If you don't see it, there's a little box here called media storage. You turn it on and off by clicking on it. And that's true for every page in Resolve. If there's little tools up here, you can basically click on them to turn them on and off. Down below here is our media pool for our project. And right now there's a master bin by default, and that's all we have. So if we wanted to bring some things in, we could highlight them over here and drag them down and let go. This says the frame rate's different. Do I want to leave it or change it? I'll say change. So now we have these 2 items in our project's media pool. So I'll navigate to a folder. I can grab this folder here, it says Tennessee. In here, I have a bunch of video clips and some stills. So if we go back out to demo and I grab this folder, if I drag that into here, it just brings the clips in that are inside that folder. If I grab the folder and bring it into the bin down here and let go, as you can see, it brings in the folder and its whole structure because I got some stills and stuff in here. So if you want to keep your bins organized, that's a good way to do that, and it'll do that automatically. Now you can bring stuff in from the Finder or Explorer too if you just drag and drop it in here as well. You don't have to do it through here. But this is if you get drives, that kind of situation. Now we have this giant preview window here. So if we did click on a clip, it'll preview over here. So this would be like, do I even want to bring this into my project? You can click on it and it'll show you what's going on in this window here. And then you can bring it in. We have clips in here. We brought them in. There is some more functionality in here. You can move this around if you needed bigger space. So you can play all your things. You could loop it. You can examine your clips. Now over to the right here, we have metadata, an inspector, and an audio tab. So if you have a clip with some audio on it, like this one, if we clicked on audio and play, it's going to give us a little preview of the audio tracks and the monitor. And we have some controls for the audio. Same with a video clip. We have some video controls down here. So if we make an alteration in our media pool here before we add it to our timeline or anything like that, that'll stay with the clip. So let's grab this track. Let's say it was too loud and we wanted to turn this volume down. We could turn it down and then play it. So you can see the volume is being affected. And now if I grab that clip and add it to my timeline, this volume control that we did before we added anything in is active. Same thing with the video. If we were over here and we went on the inspector, clicked video and we zoomed it, that move, or let's say we cropped it, those would stay with the clip prior to us adding it to the timeline. So now we've added media and a few bins to our media pool. I'll go to the cut page in another video. Let's move over to the edit page. Shortcut for that is Shift 4. So now we have our edit page, and this tells us we're an untitled project. We don't have a timeline made, so that's why everything's grayed out, but we do have access to our media here. Resolve wants timelines to work in. So you could do that a few ways. You could drag a clip, and watch when I go to drag it, this area is going to populate and we'll get a little thumbnail right here that says timeline. So that's making a timeline for us based on those clip properties. You could also hit File and New Timeline or Command N in a Mac. This gives you a chance to change your starting time code, name it, tell it how many tracks you want, what type they are, and then some project settings like color space and aspect, pixel dimensions. For now, we'll leave that on default and hit Create. So now you can see a timeline got added right here. I've got 2 video tracks and 2 audio tracks, but no clips. So now we could essentially just drag a clip down in here. Now there's shortcuts to edit. We could choose a clip and hit Shift F9, and that'll add it. Now there's another way called 3-point editing. So if we have a clip on our timeline right now and click on it, this is our timeline viewer up at the top. And you could resize it, or if you grab this little line right here and scroll and drag, or you can view your dual source viewer with this little click box in the upper right. So when we choose it, we now have what's going on in our timeline on the right and our preview or source monitor here on the left. So if I drag a clip into here, now I can choose some in and outs over here and see if I like it. And then this is our edit down here. So let's say we wanted to add this clip right next to this clip in our timeline. 3-point edit is where we grab our source media, we hit an in with an I key, and then forward a little bit, hit out. So now we have point 1 is the in, point 2 is the out. And if we want to add that into our timeline, we could drag it over and we'll get these edit styles here, or we could drag it to the timeline, or we can use these little shortcuts here. There's insert, there's overwrite, and replace. However, we want this at the end, so I'm going to drag it over here, and you could say append at end. So drag it over your selection here and let go. Now you can see it didn't cut off any frames of our first clip and added it right there. These ones are must-know kind of edits. So under edit, here's the drop down of the edits and their keys. F9, 10, 11, 12, and then 10, 11, 12 with a shift on it for these last 3. So that's a 3-point edit. And now that's how you add clips to your timeline. If these had audio, they'd be playing back audio. And you'd see that in this little indicator here. Like let's grab this music and we'll scroll back. So here's our volume control right here, or you could mute it. And if the mixer's not showing, you get a little indicator here that there's audio. But if you remember, we turned our volume way down, so let's turn it up. I click down here in the audio region and shift scrolled to change the height of that, to zoom in. And then there's a little faint line under here that lets you control the clip's volume level. So that's how you can make quick volume adjustments, or you can click that clip and change the volume in the inspector here. And one thing I like to have open at times is the mixer. So on the upper right here, we have this little mixer. You can click on that. This shows you your tracks. So if you had more than 2, 3 tracks here, we have a bus, of course, but we have 2 audio tracks in our timeline. This can change the volume, not of the clip, but of the output. And it also shows you a visual indication. Where's the level hitting? Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So you can click that on and off, and you have a little indicator here. You could also dim your audio if you're trying to talk or something like that. So that's how you can add video clips and an audio, manipulate each one on your timeline. So now let's say you want to add a transition. There's some default ones where you could say edit here. I believe it's timeline, add transition. So you have these transitions for a fade or just video or just audio. But what most people want to do is click out of our media pool and click into effects. And now we have categories of filters, plugins, and transitions here. So if we go to transitions, here's a blur dissolve. Now Resolve's smart enough to know here's an edit here, and we have an edit back at the front of the timeline here with the start. So if I was to double click that, because our playhead's right here, it says I'll add that at the closest to your playhead. If I'm down here and I hit it, it's not going to add it for one reason, handles. So if you have two clips here, you can't use a clip unless there's some handles for you to make the dissolve happen. And here's a way to illustrate that. I'm going to grab this video clip and we're going to move it up a layer. And let's say we wanted this shot where they're in the boat to fade into this shot. We need to scoot this clip back so it's overlapping. And then we use this fade handle here. And now if we go over, I'm going to mute this audio. It's going to blend those two shots. Now, essentially, that's what's going to happen when you add a transition right here. But if you don't have handles readily available and you're going to put this on, it's not going to let you. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's grab this clip and extend it out. So see, as we extend, there's a white box. This is letting you know that's the very first frame of the clip, and you've moved the endpoint to here. So if we have both these clips extended out and they're back to back, and we go to add a dissolve, it's not going to work. In fact, it's going to tell us if we double click, try to add it, it doesn't like it because it wants some kind of handle in order to work. So here I'll go to add a transition with Command T, and it's going to say add transitions. Some of the clips don't have handles. So what do you want me to do? Skip it or trim. So I'm going to hit trim and then watch this jump again. So now we have, if we click on that edit, you could see the white box underneath, how much it trimmed off the front. So it did the same thing I showed you by stacking the clips, but in this transition here. Now you have transition control over here in the inspector. As you can see, when I click on a clip, it's video. But if I click on just the transition, inspector jumps over to transition. And now I could choose a different one if I wanted to. There's a lot of horrible ones in here that no one would use, but it is what it is. So you could set different parameters here, style, film, whether you want it to zoom in and out, stuff like that. So you can manipulate the transitions here and you can make them longer and shorter depending on the style of transition it is. So if we use this like blur dissolve here, we can actually stretch that out depending on the length of the handles here. So let's give this some more handles to work with. I'm going to trim this a little more. And now as you see when we trim, see that white box? We can now extend this blur edit that far, especially if I tell it to go here. Now it's like, okay, I'll do that. So that's how you can manipulate your transitions between audio and video. And there's a bunch over here you can preview. Some are probably never going to be used. It just depends on what you want. Now you can set favorites. If you look at this blur dissolve, there's a little white star here. I made that a favorite. So under this effects menu at the bottom, we have folders here and I have favorites. If I click on it, here's a bunch of favorites that I like, all in their different categories. And then if I click toolbox, that would be just video transitions, titles, generators, effects, stuff like that. So you can grab an effect that you use all the time, drop it on. Now I have this vignette to kind of give it a little cinematic, darkening on the sides, that kind of stuff. So that's partly how you can use effects and transitions. So if I sit here and I got a blur dissolve, I could just drop it here or just double click it. And then I can make a transition really quickly without having to even affect my timeline. I could just go through, you know what, I don't like that, let's use this. And now it switched transition for us. And then you could just click on it and delete it if you didn't want it. And now we have a good old fashioned cut. All right, we'll get into some more of these tools, but this is essentially bringing in media, adding clips to your timeline and doing some transitions, as well as using the inspector to manipulate your clips. So I'll make this a series and we'll keep building off of this. So thank you for watching. Give me a comment, subscribe if you haven't, if you like this content, and I'll see you guys on the next one.